The horror of Holocaust became known when testimonies showed it for the whole world. But last century was not only the century of Holocaust. Maybe the best way of defining it would be to speak about the totalitarian craziness century. And if we look at this past, which is so close to us, in this way, we need to find many, many testimonies about the real, direct experience of totalitarianism. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the known Russian writer and dissident, was still living in exile in USA, he wrote an article about the value of testimony. He said, among other things, that each single human life has a very special, unique message into it, and that this unique message should be communicated to the rest of the world. And it is in the spirit of Solzhenitsyn that I try to speak to you today. I will write a little text which I wrote while I was a member of the Swedish Parliament. This text has been read by me in front of the International Parliamentary Union, and it became the core of a special amendment in a special resolution of the International Parliamentary Union. So let's look at this. As a baby and an infant in extremist nationalist dictatorship, a pupil in the education system first of fascism and then of Stalinism, a student in Eastern Europe during the bloody reprisals against Hungarian and Polish rebellions, a journalist in the early days of Romanian Ceausescu terror, later a political refugee, eventually a Swedish citizen and politician in the service of Swedish democracy, one of the oldest democracies in the world, my life has taught me to constantly think about the active defense of democracy. If we really want to prevent conflicts that threaten democracy, we have to begin with the initial impulses. Preventing violent conflicts and bloody clashes means seriously engaging with the politics of hate and the idealization of violence. At the root of the present wretched situation lie political myths labeling certain people and certain phenomena as enemies, fair game, and self-evident targets of aggression. The politics of hate start with words and then slip easily into very dangerous deeds. On the 21st of December 1965 in New York, an international convention on the abolition of all forms of racial discrimination was adopted. This convention needs to be revised and extended. The violent events of recent years have not had an exclusively racist and fascist character. And it is not only threats from right-wing extremists that are undermining democracy throughout the world. The extreme right and the extreme left support and reinforce each other. By fighting openly in the streets and by hiding behind such arguments as "the others started it, we were compelled to defend ourselves," these conflicting but closely related attitudes build an arena for non-parliamentary and anti-democratic actions. The UN Convention Against Racial Discrimination, thus, needs to be reworked to cover all kinds of hate politics, all political activities based on violently attacking certain groups or certain political, social, or economical structures. The catastrophic destruction of human lives and values, which was set in motion in Tsarist Russia, began towards the end of the 19th century with anarchist attacks on everything and everyone. Bombings and assassinations were the main weapons used by these groups. In their days, they were called anarchists. Today, we would call them terrorists. Their deeds created fear and chaos and prepared the way for the collapse of society as a whole and for the Bolshevik coup d'etat. Thus started a terribly protracted period of suffering for many millions of people in many parts of the world. Neither should we forget the bloodbath of Yugoslavia. Former communist leaders shifted from class hatred, their old ideology, to the worst kind of national hatred, extremist nationalist. Red violence is no different from black violence. Class war is in no circumstances any better than race war. Aggression inspired by traditional left-wing rhetoric, class war, violent rebellion against capitalism, attacks on various kinds of private property, hatred of the USA, is as destructive as racism and xenophobia. Religious and atheist intolerance must be added to the list of ideological machines of destruction. Just a few decades ago, few people would have believed that mass murder and what is known as ethnic cleansing would reappear in our everyday lives under the banners of Christianity or of Islam. Today we know that we are living in a world that suffered as much from violence of faith as did France on the Saint Bartholomew Day or Spain in the heyday of Inquisition. Religious intolerance should be systematically combated, Christian, Jewish, and Islamic alike. The very fact that this intolerance has such a long history demands massive mobilization. Old experiences leave profound traces. Centuries-old conflicts give rise to very strongly rooted and violent superstitions about the evil of the others. I believe that the whole world needs to rewrite its history books, given the destruction that can be set in motion by intolerance imprinted in the image of the past. At the same time, we need to highlight cruelties based on the opposite way of thinking, the mass murder of priests and nuns during the French Revolution, the persecutions of believers in Stalin's Soviet Union and Mao's China, and the oppression of the Falun Gong movement today. All forms of politics based on racial hatred, class hatred, and religious and atheist intolerance ought to be combated in the member states of the UN and the European Union. Educational programs and information campaigns need to be designed so that the past and the present explosions of mass hysteria can be analyzed and their inner mechanisms exposed. Preventive measures need to be set in motion to isolate and stop political movements attempting to capitalize on violence, fear, aggression, and revenge. We have beautiful examples available to us, the work of reconciliation being carried out, for example, in South Africa. Thank you for today.